And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel, and today we're taking a look at a game that I was pretty pumped about called Ignite. Ignite is a tactical combat game where you're going to take different creatures and you're running them across the board, fighting with them, but you're doing so a la deck builder. Deck building is one of my favorite mechanisms, and I also like combat, so the combination sounded really interesting. This is also a really big box, and there's even more. I have this expansion here called The Freeze, which has almost as much content card-wise as the base game. A ton of extra stuff that can be done. The base game just has a lot more miniatures and stuff, and there's even a dragon thing, which I haven't really messed with. So let's take a look at this, and we'll be back. At the beginning of the game, you're going to pick your faction. So let's say I want to be here, the Panda Bears. You'll take the 3 warriors of your faction. You put a base on them to show that what color you are. Each faction has a card that gives you their special abilities. So for example, the Panda Bears, before they play, their starting deck is going to have a couple extra cards put in it. These guys are immune to damaging elements on the board. These can be pure spells, can be used for +2 honor each. The humans, they draw 7 cards in a turn instead of 6. However, their first battle card costs an extra honor. Their ranged attacks get an extra 1 for the elves, etc. So you're going to take these 3 and put them on the board. You're going to build a board based on a number of players. And I'm showing you the things here because I'm not showing you the whole board, just kind of what the board looks like. These pieces here that slide in. You have a grid here that you will occasionally use. The main thing is there are town spaces on the board, and then there are other terrains that are out there, and each of these terrains will affect possibly movement and attack. But the town spaces are there because you need to have your figure on a town space to be able to buy new cards. At its core, the Ignite is a deck building game. At the beginning of the game, you're going to have 5 March cards, you're going to have 4 Dagger cards, and you're going to have 3 Old Wooden Shield cards. These cards are going to be shuffled together to make your starting deck. There's then going to be 16 more decks out there. And you can use, I'm showing you the randomizer cards here for these, but you can pick any number of decks that you want. You pick the combination of decks that you'll put out there, and then there's going to be piles of cards on all these that players will have. So players are going to shuffle their deck, and on your turn, you're going to have 6 cards in your hand. You will get to play these cards and use them for various things, discarding them, then drawing. And when you run out of cards in your, when you try to draw, there's no cards there, you'll take your discard pile, shuffle it, and make a new deck. So when you play a card, there are 2 things that you can use it for. One, you can use it for the actions that are on it. So that's going to happen often. The basic ones that you have are marches, which lets you move 1 on the board. And again, terrain might mess with that movement. For the most part, you get to move 1 to an adjacent spot. A dagger lets you do an attack to somebody who's next to you. This has a range of 1, and it can be blocked by any weapon. So any weapon can be played to block a dagger. And also, you have shields, which let you, where's the shield here? You can trash this card, which means remove it from your deck to block a weapon, projectile, or mount. The shield cannot shield bash, which seems kind of weird, but anyway, they put that on there. So if you're next to somebody else and you attack them, they're going to take a damage. When you damage somebody, you're going to be sticking a dagger in their back. So there's a little 3 spots on most of the characters. One has only 2 spots, but they have 5 units, so that's to even it out. And you'll take that dagger and stick it in their back to show they have a damage. When you've done the 3rd damage to somebody, you'll be taking that person as a trophy, and whoever has the most trophies, whoever gets a certain number of trophies first will win the game. Now, you can also play cards for their honor. When you play cards for their honor, you ignore everything else on them, and you simply discard them to get this honor number in the top, which is essentially the currency of the game. You then can buy cards down here, like I can buy this recurve bow. It costs 6. That's the number down there. And this has a range of 2 to 3, although I would need to buy arrows, another card, for it to work. I might buy this chariot here, which has moved 2 of my adjacent units up to 3 spaces each. and they have to remain adjacent during the whole time. Or a magic potion bomb, or a blessed spear. This is a range of 1, damage of 1, but I can go through my discard pile when I play it, remove up to 2 cards, and place them on top of my deck. So there's all kinds of cards in the deck, and they go, I think, the highest ones. So there's a ton of different cards here. Like here's a fire arrow. I can use that with the recurved bow, but I have to have my hand at the same time. The cards go from, I think, cost 3 all the way up to, I want to say there are cards that are cost 11 or something like that. Meteor Strike is a 9. That one you write down coordinates on the board, and you pick them, and then next turn, if anyone's in those spots at the beginning of your next turn, they're dead. So let's see, water minions, unicorn, yeah. So there's water missile, but you have to be next to water to be able to make this go off. A tiger mount, which no one has yet to be able to explain to me. If you're playing the tigers, can you use this card? Do tigers ride tigers? I don't know. But anyhow, that's the way that the game is going to work. If your characters die in a multiplayer game, then you basically are out of the game, sort of, except you can bring in a bunch of like spirits. You put them in bases of your color, and you move them around, and they just move 1 and do 1 damage, which doesn't really do a lot. You're still in the game. You just get to have no fun while being in the game. So that's the basics of the game. Realize there are a ton of decks in here. There's even more in the expansion. So there's a lot going on. But let's talk about it. All right, folks. We have a lot of components here. So we'll start with the miniatures. The miniatures are fine. They're not great, but they're fine. I mean, they all look different. The problem that you have, which is many miniature problems, these bases do not fit on well at all. I don't know what it is. I cannot get them to fit on. So that's problematic. Secondly, these daggers are really cool. They are really hard to fit in, and it's just a very fiddly part of the game. I like it visually, but just such a pain, and they're also really tiny. Have this bag full of little daggers. The board. So the board is, as I showed you earlier, you have this grid on the top, and it's essentially a bunch of pieces that fit together like this. So I have a lot of problems with this. There's 2 sides to the board because lava. The terrain looks boring as all get out. It's really boring looking. I don't get it at all. The terrain doesn't do much in the game. It's a big square. But also, what is this? Like, I don't understand the point of this. They only connect this way. They don't connect up and down. So it's not like the game's a big puzzle. But it just, the board, just give me a board. Just let me unfold a board and put it out. The box is big enough. Just connecting them to have different shades of terrain. Ooh, especially when all the town pieces are the same. All these buildings don't mean anything. All right. The card artwork itself is fine. I mean, there's a lot of different cards in here, and it's fairly fantasy. I mean, it's kind of weird because it's like the people who made this game were like, I think people will. I mean, you have these humans and orcs, but then you also have tigers and pandas. And like I said, the tiger riding the tiger seems like an odd thing. But I don't know. It's very generic. Also, there's a lot of text on these things, and, well, I'm going to get more into that. A lot of complexity to that. The rule book is okay, but I'll tell you, there's this whole section here, playing a card for its honor and selling a card for its honor, and it's just kind of messy. In the middle of the board, you're going to have a market where you can sell a card, which basically gets rid of it to get this honor. And you have to have your characters in city spaces to do so. When they're in the city space, they take extra things. There's just a lot of... I just found the whole rule book to be just a bit messy. There is a how to play video you can go and watch online, but the big rule book here, I didn't find it to be as useful as not. And everything fits in this giant box. And so there's a gazillion cards. Setup and teardown is pretty significant here, especially since you're playing with 16 different decks. So, I don't know. I thought the components detracted from the game more than helped. I like to be really clear here. I hate this game. I'm struggled to find anything about this game that I like. And I'll tell you what, the sticking the daggers part in, which when I first saw that, I was like, yes, that sounds great. Okay, so where do we start? I've already kind of said the components. There's a big problem. Player powers. Each player has a power. Each of the different factions has a power. Okay, great. That's interesting. I try, folks, to not necessarily call games unbalanced, but the player powers are unbalanced. I don't see how anyone can think otherwise. So the Panda Bears, they get to take 2 cards out of their deck and take 2 level 4 cards, which are very weak cards compared to the rest of the cards in the game, and put them in their deck. That's their whole power. The Tigers, the Cats, they get to, for their first movement card in the game, get to move an extra 2 movement, which means they are running across the board. If they have any movement card in their hand, and that lasts the whole game, it is clearly better. Clearly better. I don't care. You start with 2 minor cards that you start at the beginning of the game, and on the Cats' first turn, they can buy one of those cards. And on their second turn, they can buy another card. Now, you can say, well, I can also buy some cards. Sure, you might be slightly ahead, but they've bought the cards. They've almost caught up. Meanwhile, they're running at you. Big problem I have with that. Secondly, the cards themselves, I am mind-boggled at this. It's just, so there's a 9-point cost card. It costs 9. That's the bow. You then need to buy arrows, which I think cost 3 or 4. Doesn't matter. There's different arrows. I think regular arrows are 3, fire arrows are 4. Fine. So I bought the bow. I bought the arrows. I kept drawing the bow and not having arrows. I drew the arrows, didn't have the bow. Oh, but I can buy the quiver, which lets me save arrows so that when I get the bow, so that you can buy all this. Also, there's a lightning spell, which you can just buy and cast, and it does the same thing, basically. What? This game has all these cards that do these things, and there's fun ones, like the meteorite one is my favorite card in the game, but even then you're like, oh, I need to write down on a piece of paper where this lands? That's a problem. These cards, they don't feel balanced. The costs of them are really expensive, so it's a messy deck builder of a game. The shields, you have to discard out of your hand. They cost 3 when someone blocks you. Ugh. So that then combined with combat. This is combat. Do, 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 do. Hit, 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 dead. There's not much more to it than that. There's no tactics, no strategy. Maybe if you get the bows and ranged attack, you run up to the other person, you hit them. But then it's the person who puts the final dagger in, which makes a multiplayer game of this. The person who does the final dagger gets the kill, and I did the other 2 hits. And then they got rules like if you're in the town, you aren't expecting an attack, so you take an extra damage. The town is most of the board. What kind of combat is this? What do you mean you're not expecting an attack? I can see the guy running towards me. Ah! And then when you're dead, they're like, hey, you're not dead. You get to still move these really slow water creatures around. No! No one wants to do that. Just say there's player elimination in the game. Boulder Dash. The board is ugly. It's a slow, just run at the other person, hit them. It's not an interesting tactical game, and it's not an interesting deck building game. And they combine the 2 of them. It's a big box of not fun. And I just cannot recommend this. I might be alone here. I went online and saw tons and tons of very positive comments and things. So to that end, maybe there's a lot of people who are really going to enjoy this one. I just don't get it. It plays, 2 to 7 players, something like that. Well, I don't know why I would want to play a big cluster fight where you're all running around hitting each other. It feels like it's best with 2 players, I guess. But again, then I got 3 people, you got 3. We slowly go across the board, unless you're the Cats, in which case you can run across the board, and hit each other. You play a card, I hit you. Can you block it? No, I hit you. You can't block it? Oh, okay, your turn. The luck of the cards you draw. Man, wow, this was a miss for me. Again, I'm trying to think of anything I like. Let's see. I hate the board. I hate the cards. It takes forever to set up. The gameplay is boring. It's bad at all player counts. Yeah, sorry. This is just not one I can recommend at all. That's Ignite. I'm Tom Vasel. This is Dice Tower. We'll see you next time. Dice Tower Judgment. I hate it.